Ladies and gentlemen, New Orleans football. This is Mike Triplett and Nick Underhill talking about if you could change one thing from the Saints season, what's the worst thing that happened to the Saints? Like, what would be something you go back, you can change one singular thing, and it fixes the season? Now, this is an interesting question. This is obviously from the YouTube channel. The whole video link will be in the description below. Per usual, journalistic ethics right here are always strong. Now, I haven't watched this. I just saw it. I heard about it, and I want to react to it with all of you guys. So let's let them set it up, and then we'll respond and react accordingly, as only I can do.
I want to talk about the things. If just one thing changed, you can change one thing, and you think because you change this one thing, the Saints are like everything's positive for the Saints. I think there's actually some of them. I think there's some things that you only get to make one change. One guy doesn't get hurt. They make one quarterback decision. They win one more game. They don't trade CJ Gardner-Johnson or whatever. What is your one game that has the Saints in first place? What is your one? You get to change one thing, and the Saints are winning the NFC South right now.
Okay, so I think there's a couple options. The options are, what do you do with the quarterback position from the beginning of the year? Do you start Dalton to start off? Do you say Jameis never gets hurt? Do you believe that he figures it out? Do you say Michael Thomas never gets hurt? Would having Michael Thomas have changed things? There's options. Obviously, Kamara, his usage, things like that. Obviously, I think people on this channel or in the comments who have watched these videos know that I've been very critical of Pete Carmichael and Dennis Allen. So it's like a bigger thing, but obviously an enormous change would be if we didn't go with them to start the season and we went with someone else. I mean, there's a lot of first-year coaches out there right now that I think you could look at, like Mike McDaniel, and look at and say, like, man, if we had him, imagine if we had him. But that's I feel like that's too much of playing God. That's too much of, no shit, right? Like, of course, if we had one of the best young coaches in the NFL, everything would be different. So I want to try and keep it realistic. I want to try and keep it to what has happened inside of the season. So I'll give you two. My first one, my actual choice would probably be Kamara's usage. I think that has been the worst thing that Allen and Carmichael have done this year, is the games where Alvin Kamara gets 8 touches, situational spots, him not being on the field. I think if we had a better grasp of what we do offensively, what we try and do, or a scheme or anything like that, if we had something there, I think we would have won games that we lost close, like Tampa. And I mean, even the Mark Ingram play, with the play where Ingram goes out of bounds and he's hurt. If Kamara's in there, just that play alone, just that one usage difference alone, we could be in first place. So I'll say Kamara is my number one, his usage and how they've played, how they've managed personnel and rotations. My number two would probably be Michael Thomas not getting hurt. If he doesn't get hurt, I think Olave is free to be against the second cornerbacks. Thomas is productive. I think the offense would look pretty damn good if we had Thomas and Olave, especially with Dalton now, because Dalton's playing really well. I'm not going to say start Dalton, even though I've said pretty much the entire year that I think Dalton has run the offense better, but who knows what would have happened early on. I think it was fine when he took over. I think offensively we've been pretty decent since then. So that's my answer.
Well, it's a twofer. It's a twofer. I'm going to go with a twofer here because they're both the same guy, but I think it's Marshawn doesn't get ejected from the Tampa Bay game, and I think maybe they win that, and then 2, he doesn't get injured. So like if you have Marshawn the full way through the season, every single snap, every single game, I think they win a couple games and everything kind of changes a little bit.
I mean, obviously Marshawn Lattimore is really good, no doubt about it. But I think I'm not saying he's wrong, but I'm saying that's one of the least impact kind of decisions is Marshawn Lattimore. Would he have changed games? How would he have changed games? I totally understand having your best corner and one of the better corners in the NFL changes things, but would it change things as much as Michael Thomas? Probably not. Would it change things as much as more production from your best offensive player? Probably not. But Lattimore, I think Lattimore being on the field would have obviously made a big difference. I don't think it would have been changing that we win the South or changing really the direction of the season. But I feel you.
I think he's that important to the team. And again, we've had the conversation about injuries and all this and his excuses and da 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 da. He's one of the best players in the
Yep.
league. Everything they do on defense is based around him. Their pass defense has actually been pretty good the whole year, but I think we can look at a handful of big moments in every single game. Granted, they lost the Minnesota game throwing at him, but I think there's just some stuff.
I think he kind of answered his own question right there. Like if their pass defense is already pretty good and we're still losing these close games, would a bump in an already pretty good pass defense have changed things? And when we did have them, we lost a super close game. So that's really kind of all I needed to hear.
That changes throughout the year, and I think just having them on the field puts them in better situations, and they're covering differently. And Paulson Adebo isn't on Mike Evans on the most critical play, and stuff like that. So I think it would just kind of give them. It doesn't have to be a huge shift to be in first place right now. It's like 2 games, and I think he's a 2-game difference.
Without question, a healthy Marshawn, and I mean, I don't know if you're allowed to have both. I made the rules up.
Well, okay, my sliding door moment is Marshawn every single snap, every single game.
Yeah, I know. Like, but you're right. Like,
all right, give the Tampa game away though, and I still think.
I think they win the Tampa game if he doesn't get ejected. I really do.
Because Jameis doesn't press.
But they also attacked PJ Williams right after that. Now Marshawn wasn't perfect because they easily could have won that Minnesota game, and he had one of his worst days in years against Justin Jefferson. But I maybe he doesn't give up the 60-yard pass to Jamar Chase. And to me, that's the game. I mean, you could say Tampa, but they would be what would they be right now? 5-8. They'd be a 5-8 division leader if they beat Tampa. They should have beat Tampa. But I think they should have beat the Cincinnati Bengals. And what
are we talking about? What are we talking about? What do you mean? Obviously, it's Tampa. We're up 14-3 with whatever it was, 2.5 minutes or 4 minutes left. We have the ball. What are we talking about? That's a divisional game. That was one of the worst collapses in Saints history. If we fix that game, we're in first place. It's not against the Bengals. It's not against arguably the best team in the NFL, who we let Joe Burrow do what Joe Burrow does, have a 2-minute drive. Great. He's going to, it is what it is. That Tampa game, if we're talking about just this season, and y'all know how I look at this, I don't give a shit about being a 6-win division winner. I'm not sitting here. I've never understood. I just look at things way more in the future. Where if we're a 6-win division champion and we go to the playoffs and we get our ass kicked versus not, who cares? I'm looking things of what are we going to do in the future? What are we going to do coaching wise? What are we going to do quarterback wise? What are we going to what's the philosophy the front office going to be moving forward? I don't really care about being. I'm not worried about this. Like, are we below average or average? But if I did care about that, and I was pointing to one thing this season that changed the division, changed all of that, our playoff chances, you have to take a big red marker and circle the Tampa Bay collapse. That was the whole kit and caboodle. The Cincy thing, yeah, we could have won and should have won the Cincy game. We could have won, should have won Minnesota. That doesn't matter. What matters is what happened in Tampa when we blew that game.
What a different tone that makes. There's a million ways they could have beat the Bengals. Get one first down, complete one more pass. Don't give up a 60-yard pass to Jamar Chase. Whatever that one play is, that would have saved the outlook on Dennis Allen a little bit more, because they got off to that awful 1-3 start, but then they came back and beat Seattle. They got 2 in a row, beat Seattle, beat Cincinnati. I think they might be a first place team right now. And I just don't think the tone of this whole season would have been, this team is a train wreck. And that game would look better after every week. It looks like Cincinnati's going back to the Super Bowl at this point. That's the one game let me replay any one series in the Cincinnati game, and I think this is a much different team.
What's yours?
I'm confused. How could replaying one game this season to change the tone? How could you not choose the Tampa game? Divisional, arguably our biggest rival. I consider the Bucs a bigger rival than the Falcons. The Falcons, who no one cares about the Falcons. Okay, every time I see Falcon Hate Week and all this stuff on Twitter, it's just, I mean, it's the biggest bunch of losers there are. The Bucks are our biggest rival. They have been our biggest rival. They've been our biggest threat during the Breeze era. At the end there, they were our biggest threat to try and advance through the playoffs. You know, that's the team. That's the team you want to beat. You want to beat, like, having the Falcons as your rival. That's kind of sad. You don't want to have the Falcons as your rival. No one has the Texans as their rival. No one has, you know, like, who cares? Who cares about the Falcons? I certainly do not. I don't care about Marcus Mariota. I don't care about Desmond Ridder. I don't care about Falcons Hate Week. The Bucks is the game. Division. They swept us. Should have won both games, really. Certainly should have won the one in Tampa. And inside of that game, he talks about taking one play away from the Bengals game. If you add 1.5 yards to a Mark Ingram reception, we're in first place in the division. It's that simple. If you add 4 feet to Mark Ingram's reception, if you just add that, take away Lattimore, take away whatever, any of that stuff, you just add 4 feet to one play in the season, boom, we're division champions.
That's the one I'm saying. Like, I
thought you were talking about just Marshawn. Okay, sorry.
No, I'm saying I want to get, like, give me any other series to do over in the fourth quarter of the Cincinnati game. And I think that makes a huge difference on how this season is viewed. We could go back and we could say they should have never hired Dennis Allen. That if people watching this, I bet 78% of people would say that on a poll. But does that mean they should have hired Aaron Glenn? Does that mean they should have hired Eric Bieniemy? Does it mean they should have hired Doug Peterson?
Yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning of when I was talking about that's such a, like, that is an easy one, right? The easy one is to say you don't hire Allen, you name your person, and then they have an incredible, an incredible season. But who's to say that Bieniemy wouldn't have come in here and it would be just as bad? You know, like, I'm not totally sold on Bieniemy, but that was too easy for me to say. So I try to keep it inside. But as far as one game, I know for sure Tampa was bad. The things, like, if he's talking about the tone of the season, right? I think the tone of the season, obviously losses hurt. Like, no doubt about it, right? Like, winning fixes a lot of stuff. Winning is the ultimate Band-Aid. If we were winning, I don't think people would be harping on Pete Carmichael and Dennis Allen as much. But I think what grinds people's gears, and at least what I see both in the stands, like, I've been to every Saints home game. I hear what people are saying in the stands. I hear what they're saying in the Loge Club. No flex intended. I live a couple blocks from this. I know what people are saying here, and then what people are saying on Twitter. It sounds like they're mad because they just don't understand what they're doing. You know, like, that's what seems to suck, is that the losses are being compounded with just watching the game and having absolutely no flow at all. I mean, I just saw on Twitter that David Johnson ran more routes in the Falcons game than Alvin Kamara. People see that, even in a win, people see that and they're just like, what are we doing? You know, what the hell are we doing? And I mean, I've been having a lot of conversations this week with people in YouTube comments, and I appreciate all the comments. Thank you very much. I try and answer all of them. I read almost all of them, at least 90% of them, and I try and respond to as many as I can, no matter good or bad. Usually pretty transparent with the viewers, and I thank you all for that. But that's the conversation. It's just, what are we doing out there? And we see the mistakes, we see the weird decisions, and I think that's what has people kind of downtrodden, is just watching this team having absolutely no flow, absolutely no philosophy, absolutely no vision, and just rolling the ball out there and see what happens. So that's been a bad tone as well. Not winning road games is a bad tone. You know, every time you turn on the TV, the Saints are losing. Blowing games, even the Falcons game. Like, we're winning, we're dominating that game. It's 14-0. Why all of a sudden are we in danger of losing the game? You know, why all of a sudden are we in danger of losing that game and we're having to sweat out Desmond Ridder? I mean, Desmond Ridder threw for 90-something yards. Desmond Ridder threw for 90-something yards on the road, and the Falcons had a chance at the end. The Falcons had a chance because we just squandered away a 14-point lead against a rookie quarterback. We should have won that game 28-3. You know, we should have dominated that game. We blew the game against Tampa. Those are tone setters.
Well, I'll say
if they made all the same personnel moves and they still lost Sean Payton and they did all that and they hired Aaron Glenn or Doug Peterson instead, Are they way better off? I don't know.
No, they're not. Not if they made the same personnel moves. They're not. They are better off, but they're not way better off. I mean, this, and I'll go back to Michael Thomas. Like last year we had insane injuries. The roster was completely destroyed. This year, if Thomas would have been healthy, the offense roster-wise, talent-wise, right now would be pretty strong. I mean, right now you'd be rolling out an offense with Andy Dalton, who's playing pretty well. I'd say is playing average in the NFL right now. Andy Dalton, Alvin Kamara, Juwan Johnson's come on real strong. And then you'd have a wide receiver core of Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, and Rashid. Like that is strong. When Jarvis Landry is your fourth best receiver, or you could even use him as kind of a second tight end kind of thing, like kind of a different, kind of a different look. That's a really, really powerful offense. Really powerful offense as far as like, you look at bad teams. You look at teams like the Texans. You look at teams like even the Cardinals, like the Cardinals now, without Kyler Murray. What the Saints have roster-wise ain't bad on paper. And I think that's more of what I was talking about with this tone and philosophy and vision. People see that and they're holding their hands up like, why are we so bad? I understand why the Texans are bad, but I'm not totally sure why we're this bad. We shouldn't be this bad if we have these players. And, I agree.
I don't know.
Yeah, look, I'll say no to Aaron Glenn because hiring Aaron, and I think
Yes.
Aaron Glenn will probably be a great
Same
head
approach.
coach somewhere, but it would have been for the same exact reasons, preserving the culture
Try
and
to have
doing
the
things
same assistants and
the same exact way. Yeah, I think maybe I don't know if Dable would have ever been an option, but if this was like a more open-minded, and I'm not saying it was closed-minded, they did interview a lot of people, but it kind of seemed like they had a front runner the whole way, and I think the whole world knew they kind of had a front runner the whole way. Dennis Allen canceled an interview with another team like when this was.
Yeah, I mean, he brought up Dable, and I was talking about McDaniel, but Dable's a good example too. Like Dable, he is obviously a much better head coach than Dennis Allen, and he probably would have managed some of those games better. I mean, you could say that having a different coach, I've said it, having me on the sidelines, we win the Tampa Bay game in Tampa because I don't make those 4 mistakes Dennis Allen makes at the end. Now, I've talked about that exhaustively. So Dable, I would say at least would be a difference in, because he's proven he can take a pretty mediocre roster. I would say our roster is better than the Giants. He can take a pretty mediocre roster, and through strict coaching and management, he can win games he shouldn't win. He can be in the position to win those games, whether on the road or at home or as a dog or a favorite, whatever. So I think he would at least be a difference in maybe a division title, maybe 2 wins, certainly 1 win. Do we lose Cincy? Do we lose Minnesota? Do we lose both Tampa games with Dable? I don't know. How different is the season then? So that's kind of why I didn't want to do a coach. But if you're talking about a coach as good as Brian Dable has been, you're talking about like a monumental shift.
Was going on and all that stuff. So if it would have been more open, maybe you could have got a Dable or someone else like that and kind of just really went hard after another candidate. I don't know if the search would have been completely different, but for the purposes of this exercise, we're just kind of saying from August 1st forward, everything that happened before is kind of set.
Because there's a lot of personnel. Like we could go back and revisit Jameis. We could revisit Deshaun Watson. We could revisit Teron, Marcus Williams, CJ trade.
Yeah. So it brought up CJ. It's kind of the same thing with Marshawn Lattimore. Like, I just don't think those are. I don't think those are hugely impactful positions on like the macro scale. Like looking at the whole season, having Marshawn would have helped. It sounds like I'm saying 2 things at once. Having a great player helps, but I don't think it's as impactful as people think it is. To have I'm not really sure any defensive back in the NFL right now is that impactful. Like as far as season changing, season defining. The NFL just isn't really played like that. It was like that, a long time ago. It was like that 10 years ago. I don't think it's really like that now. It's more about edge rushers defensively. Like TJ Watt, the difference he makes is obvious. Matthew Judon, Micah Parsons, the Bosas. Like having players like that is much more impactful on the current game than it ever has been. So I could hear someone like that, but that's not, it's not the Saints' issue right now.
But yeah, if you want to go August 1st forward, that limits. There's so many options.
Another one for me, and I think we kind of agree on this one for sure, is that after the Tampa game, you go to Dalton and you just
During. I say during.
Okay,
as soon
during.
As, if he really tore the ligament in his foot in the third quarter of that game, now maybe he was running on adrenaline. Maybe they didn't know what it was yet. But yeah, after the Tampa game for sure. But third quarter of the Tampa game, maybe you win that Tampa game too, because
Yep.
Jameis admitted he played horrible at the end of that game while he was playing hurt.
Yeah, he was bad.
That would be one for me. Then maybe you win that Carolina game, and then things are just different. Maybe you have some momentum coming out of there. You're 2-1. You've found a way to win some games. Maybe Andy Dalton plays better in London because he just had the Carolina game, and he's kind
Dalton, I mean, I never thought Jameis was the guy. And I'm certainly not saying Andy's the guy. But if you look at the two players, the offense has ran pretty well with Dalton. And I agree, like in the Tampa game at home, Jameis was terrible. The entire offense was terrible. The offense was stagnant. I made multiple videos on what I thought was going on with Jameis. He didn't look like, he wasn't the gunslinger that people said he was. He was much more of this like uber conservative, uber hesitant, guy who was very content with going 16 for 23 for 104 yards as long as he didn't turn the ball over. And I mean, I've been on record saying I would much rather the 30 interception, 5,000 yard Jameis, who's going to sling it, make some mistakes, but he's going to push the ball downfield. We didn't get that at all. We got a worse version of that. And Dalton has been willing to do that. Dalton's been willing to be both. He's been willing to be a game manager who's been conservative. He's also been willing to push the ball downfield. And I think our receivers are better because of it. So, but I don't think saying like if we would have started the season with Dalton, or if we'd have put Dalton in 2 games earlier, like that's another one of those things, kind of like the coaching thing, where it's a little too easy. It's a little too easy of a choice. I think, the Carolina game is probably the game where you got to look at our medical staff and you got to look at them and say, like, if Jameis was as hurt as he says he was, which I have no reason to believe he wasn't, then yeah, you got to look at the medical staff and be like, why are y'all putting him in there? But then you can do the exact same thing with Mark Ingram. If Mark Ingram tore his MCL or tore his meniscus or whatever happened in the Tampa game, why 4 minutes later is he in on a pivotal play catching a pass out of the backfield? Like, who's making those decisions? I have no choice but to put that on the coaching staff. Is there a medical doctor making those decisions on the sidelines? I have no idea what the process is, but someone is screwing that up.
kind of setting it a little bit. Maybe your offense is just a little bit more in rhythm, and maybe it just kind of changes the whole entire season. But one win right now changes your whole outlook of everything. Like if they had one more win right now with Tampa going to Cincinnati, and then it's kind of a soft schedule going forward. You could talk yourself into believing they're going to go 3-1 over these next 4. You could talk yourself into saying they should go 3-1 over the next 4. And I think they should. If they were a good team at all, even mediocre, you should be able to beat Atlanta, Carolina, and Cleveland. Philadelphia, I mean, I think they're going to get slaughtered probably, but you should be able to do that. And the circumstances with that would be a little bit different. So just that one game, I think, changes if you make that decision.
God, that Tampa. I'm thinking of that week.
I mean, 2 games. There's 2 games. Like if you really want to, the Tampa game, worst collapse ever, and then in Carolina where it was a complete no-show. Those 2 games, and you can even kind of throw Pittsburgh in there too, but those games where it was just complete no-shows. And like the Bengals game, the Vikings game, I thought we played pretty well, and it was just a coin toss at the end against good teams when they're doing good team things. That happens. That happens in the NFL. You can't win every coin toss against teams like that with a Joe Burrow or a team like the Vikings, how they're rolling. But teams like Carolina, teams like the Bucs this year, teams like Pittsburgh, those kind of games when it's just a complete slog and no one's doing anything and the Saints don't show up at all, those are the games that I want to have back. It's not the good performances that didn't go our way. It's the terrible performances that should have gone better.
Week 2 Tampa game again. Maybe the Marshawn ejection is the one, even more than the Marshawn injury. I mean, they should have been 2-0, and they'd have and look, to be fair to Jameis Winston, we could throw Jameis never gets hurt into the category too. Jameis probably would have found a nice rhythm eventually too. I mean, he broke his back in week 1 and he tore ligaments in his foot in week 2, and he admittedly wasn't himself in the fourth quarter of the Tampa game while they lost that game, and the Carolina game that was their ugliest performance of the whole year. So maybe Jameis never getting hurt is the same thing as switching to Dalton in week 2. Either way,
I'll tell you this. Let's just say Jameis not getting hurt equals how Andy's been playing the rest of the year. Let's say they both would have been at the same level. That is way more impactful than Marshawn not getting hurt.
This season with a healthy quarterback from the get-go probably makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm trying to think of another one here. There's so many.
I got one.
To go with.
This one is pre-August 1st, but it's during the season. Except the week 5 bye from the NFL. When the NFL said, after you go to London in week 4, you'll get the bye in week 5. Just say yes and thank you.
Yeah, it's
I talked about this whenever it happened. I think the non-bye, I got to remember. I'm not going to be able to pull it back. But it's something like teams that don't take the bye, there was a certain winning percentage back then, and we talked about it, and we discussed it during the betting preview for that. But that was a weird spot. I mean, it was a weird spot to have to play right after London.
Unbelievable. They never thought that with like a new head coach and everything that there might be some hiccups early in the season that they need to iron out very early on. And that would have been an advantageous spot for it. And I think it would have just been, yeah, it's early. But again, like if DA has some stuff with his processes where it's like, okay, this isn't working, we got to switch some things up. You can kind of do that evaluation at a point where you can still.
For the record, I give Dennis Allen a lot of shit. I think Pete Carmichael is a bigger problem than Dennis Allen.
Get your season back on track. They got it pushed so far back that it's just like it felt like the season should have ended after the Tampa Bay game. It doesn't feel like they should still be playing games right now. I'll throw another one out there, and I don't know how much it changes everything, but it changes something. Mike Thomas never gets hurt.
Yeah,
I think if you have him available for the whole season, we can go back and look at a handful of plays, drop passes.
Even on plays like in the Tampa game where we blew the lead, on the 3rd and 1, whenever we throw it, the slant route doesn't work out. If Thomas is on the field, you could argue that when healthy, you could argue that in that position, in that situation, 3rd and 1, he's got to run a slant route to get 2 yards. He's probably the best person in the NFL to do that. He certainly has been in his career. So in situations like that, in close games, having a guy to do that. Now, would Pete Carmichael and Dennis Allen have had him on the field? They didn't have Olave on the field. They were throwing 3rd down passes at Taysom Hill. So I don't know what the hell they would have done. But having a guy like that on the field, assuming he's totally healthy, which in this little activity we are assuming that is so impactful. And people forget, like, Olave is having to be the number 1 guy. He's having to be the guy the defenses are trying to take away. So if he wasn't that guy, imagine how much more production Olave would have. He'd probably be the rookie of the year if he had more production. He may be the rookie of the year anyways. But if he had Thomas taking a lot of the attention, Olave's production would be through the roof. So that is a huge domino effect for sure.
Passes bouncing off people, turning into interceptions in spots that Mike would have absolutely been in had he been healthy. And that probably changes your season a little bit. Your red zone woes, you have him right there. He's the ultimate weapon down there. I think it makes life a lot easier, and it probably changes a lot of things.
Agreed.
Gosh, there's so many of them. I was going to ask you, but I was going to throw one more in when you said drop pass. I mentioned this when we were on the pod with Kevin earlier this week. I might, be the person who gets the genie in the bottle and just like says the first thing I'm thinking of. How about Chris Olave catches that pass? This is what I said, Kevin. Chris Olave catches that pass instead of dropping it, then they're in first place right now, and people are probably predicting them to win the division right now. And Chris Olave is probably the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year, and we're talking about that down the stretch.
I've already said this. Like that would have all happened with Michael Thomas. That's very situational. And I think when you go super small, like super situational, super drop pass, this, it's impossible not to talk about the Ingram play. It's impossible not to talk about the Ingram play, which was 4 feet away from first place. And that goes back to the personnel thing. That goes back to all that. So I try not to get that microscopic, because there's plays like that you can take away in all kind of games. You can take away fumbles, you can take away picks, you can take away drop passes, you can take away all kinds of stuff. So when you go that in detail, you can get kind of lost.
Just would make this month more exciting. They'd still be a 5-8 team, but give me that one pass bet. I do want to throw this one in there because this I think would be second behind "Don't hire Dennis Allen" among the fans, and this technically took place after August 1st. How different is this season if they don't trade CJ?
I mean, I've already covered this. I don't think very different at all. I think it would be, he's a good player doing good player things, but how different was Philly's team after he went down? I mean, it's just impossible to say. I mean, if you take, like I said, if you take any cornerback currently in the NFL and you say take him out, what's the difference? I'm not sure there's a name that could really impact the season. We would much rather have him than not have him, but I'm not going to sit here and say that if we had him, we'd be in first place or anything like that.
It's different. I think it's different. I mean, I think he'd be somebody that good to have around in some of these moments. Now, with things careening, I don't know. Also, so I mean,
It'd be dangerous, actually.
Yeah. So
I mean, he's a volatile guy, and especially a guy playing on the deal or the situation he was on where he wanted to get paid. How would that have worked with a team that's this bad? I mean. Yeah, I mean, it could have. That's why I said I thought when Loomis traded him, I thought the whole thing was fine, because if he didn't want to pay him and he was afraid CJ was going to sit out or whatever the situation was, looking at the season, looking at the prospects, like overpaying for a cornerback at that time, I thought was fine to move on from. I wish we could have got a little more from him. But I mean, I've never had a problem with that. That's one of those like low hanging fruits that people hang on to. But I think it's kind of overblown.
depends kind of how the whole season goes. But yeah, absolutely. I think he's a talented player. Let's just, he wouldn't have the interceptions he has playing here because he wouldn't be playing deep safety. He'd be in the slot. But yeah, he's a playmaker. There's a couple games where just kind of looking at Chris Harris,
I mean, Harris is awful. The Arizona game, but like Alontae Taylor's been really good.
He played really well in a couple games, and then a couple games he got targeted a lot. So yeah, I think it just kind of changes everything a little bit. I mean, I'm not as bought into the energy narrative as a lot of people are on the timeline. I think I see them playing with a lot of energy and a lot of passion in these.
I've never ever thought the team has quit. Like I've never thought the team has quit. I've watched obviously every game. I've never seen a second where I'm like, man, this team just isn't playing. This team just doesn't care. This team's just quit on the season. I've never seen that.
Games that hasn't been the issue so far, at least from my perspective. But there was definitely something about feeding off of him to some degree. It's just some of the best pictures and the best moments over the last few years are him just kind of doing things to taunt the opponent, and then you see the teammates kind of buying into that too and getting into it with them. The Chicago running back where they're like kind of measuring themselves. Like I think stuff like that does give you a little bit of an edge on the field, and
the famous Brady face to face.
And I think that stuff makes everybody kind of be like, all right, we got to have his back now. So I do think they miss him for sure.
I do agree with you on the energy point. All the things you can fault Dennis Allen and this coaching staff for. I haven't seen a game. Pittsburgh, they were pretty dead. I mean,
Carolina was flat too.
Yeah, early in the year. Yeah. So that has happened sometimes, but they haven't given up even when their like record has been 4 games under 500. They've still come out. And the reason I brought up Cincinnati earlier, I thought that was a real crossroads moment for the team coming back from London. And the way they came out and played against Seattle and Cincinnati, I thought, oh, they might salvage this season, and it was very fleeting.
So we got another sliding door moment here. Where you want to go from here on the podcast?
Well, all right, let's marry the two topics we've already talked about. Do you go back?
I still don't get it. Like if
they're talking about the sliding door thing, which apparently Mike thinks is a phrase, but it's not a phrase. So that's what they're talking about right now. Trying to get past that.
Came from. But
do you know the name of the movie?
Sliding Doors.
Oh,
the word sliding door.
Trying to get through this.
Ritter in round 3 instead of the Falcon.
Hold up.
Whatever. The movie. I'm saying this has become.
Right, so he's going to talk about Ritter.
Google the word sliding doors moment, and I bet
it's the last one we'll do.
2 million views.
We'll do the last one here.
I don't know.
But anyway, all right. Do you go back? And I'm giving you the opportunity to be the team that drafted Desmond Ritter in round 3 instead of the Falcons.
Hold on.
It's a good question. It's a good question. Let me think about this. I'm kind of on the camp of just keep taking shots until you find your franchise quarterback. You know, like if you're in a situation like we are where we have no future prospects for a quarterback, we don't have a first round pick coming up. I don't, you know, when players like that are dropping, I don't have a problem putting them on the roster, but you got to have a plan. And unfortunately, with people like Ritter, or not unfortunately, I guess, but when you take someone like Ritter, then you got to have a plan. You know, you got to be like, all right, look, we're going to do this, this, and this, and then he's going to get game time here, or we're going to play him next year, but we're going to at some point turn the keys over to him and see if he's the man. I think when you go into the season like we did with Jameis and Dalton, that would have never been the plan, because some people were still holding on to the idea like, hey, a full season of Jameis, if he doesn't get hurt, maybe he'll be really good. And maybe Jameis can be the guy for a few years. So if that's your plan, then it gets real confusing if you also have Ritter. Because then, let's say Jameis goes down. Do you go to Ritter? Do you go to Ritter that early? Or is he not ready? And then you're carrying 3 quarterbacks, and you go to Dalton, and then if Dalton's not good, you're going to have people wondering, are you going to go to Ritter? Even if Dalton is good, like he has been, people in a situation like this where the season's sunk, people may be saying, we want to see Ritter. Well, maybe he's not ready, you know? So I think given the structure of the team, probably not. I probably wouldn't have gone back and taken Ritter or Willis or Howell or any of the guys who dropped. Next year would be a year where you do take someone like that. I mentioned Grayson McCall, and now he's coming back to college. But next year would be a year where you're in the 3rd round, you're in the 2nd round, you're in the 4th round. There's a quarterback that's dropped. There's a quarterback you're interested in that can maybe get some reps, or you want to see what he's got. And you're going, you know, you don't have a guy like, you don't have anything. You don't have a situation like Jameis coming into this year. You're just trying to find something. Then I think you do take guys like that, and you do see what they have going on, or see if they can be the franchise guy. So I'm going to say no, but this upcoming season or this upcoming draft, I would certainly be looking at who could fall in that 2nd to 4th round.
What's the rating?
I don't think it's a good movie.
It's 6.7 out of 10.
Yeah,
I mean,
nobody's saying it's a good movie.
That's not embarrassing. We'll just move on from there. Okay, so drafting Ritter, what, in the 3rd round?
Do you want to be the team that drafted Ritter in the 3rd round this year instead of the Falcons?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any of these quarterbacks? Yes.
And well, that you'd say Malik Willis.
Yes.
Too. Okay.
Yeah.
I liked Ritter. I actually liked Ritter. So I want to be on record before he has a good game against the Saints that he was one I was interested in. But we all want the star quarterback. But do you wish that this team already had Pickett or Ritter or Malik Willis? Or will you take the 2nd or 3rd round guy next year? Like,
oh, just answer this. Glad I could help. And while now that we've seen a few of these guys, I certainly would rather have that upcoming pick over Pickett, Willis, or Ritter. I'm not very impressed with any of them.
Do you believe in that? Do you like the Mariota Ritter plan, or the the even Tannehill Willis, but they already had Tannehill. But do you like the Falcons Mariota Ritter approach better than the Winston Dalton approach?
Yes, I think that in general is the better plan. Like, have your veteran guy, have your Marcus Mariota, have your Andy Dalton, and then have the guy waiting in the wings and give him a little bit of time. I think that is the move. I've always advocated for that, even with like the Aaron Murrays and the AJ McCarrons, you know, where it's like, look, this guy's a proven winner. This guy's a player. This guy has done it at a high level at the college ranks. Let him sit behind a veteran like Andy Dalton. Let him sit back there for a year and a half, and then maybe see what he's got in a handful of games. See what you can work with. If he doesn't have it, you don't have a lot of capital. He's a third, he's a 3rd, 4th, 5th round draft pick. Cut him loose. I would much rather that. And I don't understand why teams don't do that more than hold on to people like Brett Ripien or like Trevor Siemian or backups like that who they're bad to start with, and then they don't have any future. I would much rather take a chance on Bailey Zappi, have a Bailey Zappi behind Andy Dalton, than have go into next season with like the Winston Dalton combo. Because then if you strike out, if you go 0 for 2, you're just dead in the water. But if you go 0 for 2 with a Dalton and a Zappy, you can at least say like, hey, look, we're trying out these young guys. We're just going to rotate these young guys until we find a guy who we think can play. And not every quarterback from the draft is going to be a perennial pro, an all pro or whatever. But you just want to kind of catch lightning in a bottle and let a young guy be good for a few years and then see what happens. Not every star quarterback's not going to be Joe Burrow, but you got to find something in the middle there with some youth on a rookie contract. That's how good teams are built.
Well, here's what I'd do. I'd be fine with Mariota, Ritter. I like that approach definitely better for sure. You have upside
100%.
on one of them.
Yeah,
The Falcons have, I don't know, they're fine. They're in a fine position right now. Saints are in last place, so I mean, there's really nothing. There's really nowhere lower to go. But I like that plan, and then you got to look at Ritter at the end of the season, and if you're extremely underwhelmed, draft another one.
Yeah,
and just
exactly
keep doing it. And it doesn't, like, where are you going? You can't get worse. You can only really get better from here. So
exactly,
I like the approach of getting guys that you see some traits, and it's like, all right, yeah, let's do this, and all right, it doesn't work, that's fine, try again. And Saints 100%.
Like, instead of taking a 4th round backup guard, if you need a quarterback, take a guy. Take someone who is really good at a small school. Take someone who put up huge numbers, but there's some questions. Give them a chance. And if you're bad, do it again. Like, I'll do one better. I would rather that than taking a quarterback like 18th overall in the first round, or even higher. Like, wouldn't you rather have the Desmond Ritter situation than the Zach Wilson situation? Because now, like, our Trey Lance, where you have this guy and you're like, man, damn, we have to, like, the Niners, they would love to move off Trey Lance, but they have so much capital invested in Trey Lance, they almost have to do something. They almost have to make a move with him. They're married to him. They're tied to him. So I would much rather roll out third round, 4th round, 5th round quarterbacks. I would rather do that than have so much invested in a guy like Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, even Trey Lance, anyone like that.
Aren't making a lot of mid-round picks anyhow.
Well,
I'd rather have a 3rd round quarterback instead of Zach Bond.
Would you rather have Alontae Taylor or Desmond Ritter is the question right now. Ritter? I mean, I would. I'm not
out of those two right now, knowing everything I know, I'd go with Taylor over Ritter. I'd take my chance next year. I'm cool with that.
afraid to say it, even though Alontae Taylor looks promising. Yeah,
I don't know anything about him, and he might be really bad. But if he can be part of that. Finding a number 2 cornerback is a lot easier than finding a number 1 quarterback. And is Ritter probably the guy? Probably not. Do you have probably better odds of hitting the cornerback in the 2nd round? I don't know. Maybe both those positions are kind of hard to draft, and the positional value is super high. So the Saints might have actually stole a player there. So that's kind of, it's a little bit tough, but it's the same question as Mahomes or Lattimore. Like, let's say both these guys work out, and Taylor could go either direction, even though he started hot. Ritter could be nothing but.
That's a little different because Mahomes is arguably is in the conversation of finish as the greatest quarterback to ever live. But if you could, it would be more like Lamar Jackson, someone who's an MVP, someone who's uber talented, but probably isn't that level of a Burrow or a Mahomes or someone like that. Would you rather have the Jackson or would you rather have the Lattimore? Obviously, you'd rather have the Jackson. It's a quarterback-driven league. Like, obviously, you're going to take the quarterback for sure.
But let's assume they both work out. Would you rather have Lattimore or Mahomes? Of course you'd rather have Mahomes. And if Ritter's a viable starting NFL quarterback and Taylor's a viable starting cornerback, you'd obviously rather have the quarterback.
Another way to put it would be, would you rather have Lattimore or Kirk Cousins? Because Cousins is a good quarterback. Never been an MVP, never really won anything, going to keep you in games. But how valuable is an above average quarterback?
There's a way out with the quarterback.
It's what you say is obviously irrefutable. Like, you'd rather have the good quarterback than the good player. It is still mystifying to me how the entire league decided to pass on this year's draft class. The Saints passed on Pickett twice, and 18 other teams passed on Pickett. And then Ritter and Willis were the second and third ones drafted, and they slipped all the way into round 3. I wonder if those guys are all going to end up being hot garbage, and the league will be.
They'll be whatever. They'll be average. All right, we're going to end it there. Thank you guys for watching. This was a long one. Let me know in the comments below, what is the biggest thing you would change in the Saints season? What's the thing you would have changed? What do you think was the most impactful thing that went wrong for the Saints? That if you switch that one thing, the Saints season is totally different. Let me know in the comments below. Get as crazy as you want. Thank you for watching. Again, I appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.